In the autumn of 1887, a 26-year-old self-taught ethnographer named James Mooney arrived at the edge of the Great Smoky Mountains in western North Carolina, carrying a satchel of pencils and a leather notebook. Working on behalf of the Bureau of American Ethnology in Washington, his official charge was straightforward: to record what the eastern band of Cherokee remembered about their past on the reservation known as the Qualla Boundary, before that living memory faded. Mooney possessed no university degree, yet he brought an extraordinary dedication to understanding indigenous traditions. Within a month of arriving, he dismissed his official interpreter, choosing instead to sit alone in winter cabins, learning the Cherokee language directly from the elders who were willing to speak. What he recorded over the next 3 years, preserved today across 47 field notebooks in the Smithsonian Archives, presented an account of North American history that mainstream academia was unprepared to fully categorize. The Cherokee elders Mooney interviewed, men and women born before the forced relocation of the Trail of Tears, did not describe the surrounding mountains as an ancient, untouched wilderness that their ancestors had settled as original inhabitants. Instead, they spoke of the landscape as inherited ground. They recounted that long before their own migration into the southern Appalachians, the mountains and forests belonged to older, distinct peoples who had shaped the land. Chief among Mooney's informants was an elder medicine man named Swimmer, known in Cherokee as Ayunini. Swimmer had spent his life preserving sacred formulas written in Sequoia's Cherokee syllabary, keeping his personal manuscript wrapped in cloth and hidden in the rafters of his cabin. Among these formulas were texts classified under a category Swimmer translated as remembering, archaic compressed oral histories of what he called the older time. When Swimmer gained trust in Mooney, he shared details of a period before the ground itself had settled into its present form. Swimmer insisted that in this earlier era, the mountains were higher, the rivers ran in different courses, and the boundaries between physical inhabitants and the land had not yet been strictly fixed. In the accounts of the elders, 3 distinct groups preceded the Cherokee in the region. There were the Nunehi, or the Immortals, who inhabited invisible townhouses hidden within the mountain peaks. Beneath them were the Yunwi Tsunsdi, the little people who dwelt in rock shelters and taught the first medicine men their sacred formulas. Most intriguing of all were the Moon-eyed people, a pale, nocturnal population who lived in the region long before the Cherokee arrived, whose eyes were ill-suited for daylight, and who were eventually displaced or relocated further west. This mention of the Moon-eyed people was not an isolated detail invented in the late 19th century. Nearly a century before Mooney set foot in the Smokies, the Philadelphia physician and naturalist Benjamin Smith Barton recorded virtually identical testimony from Cherokee delegates in the 1780s. Barton published these accounts in 1797, describing a pale, nocturnal population driven out of the mountains by Cherokee warriors generations earlier. That 2 independent ethnographic snapshots, separated by 90 years and recorded by different observers, yielded the exact same physical description and historical trajectory, underscored the consistency of Cherokee oral memory. Cherokee elders maintained that their own people were not indigenous to the southern Blue Ridge in an absolute sense, but had migrated from the north and east roughly 20 to 30 generations prior, inheriting a world already shaped by others. What the Cherokee inherited, according to Swimmer and other elders, was an old forest that functioned less like a wild jungle and more like an expansive, cultivated park. Swimmer described how, upon their arrival, the ground beneath the high canopy had been systematically maintained with open walking rooms clear of thicket and undergrowth. A rider could gallop a horse at full speed through the woods for miles, protected by a dense, continuous canopy that kept the ground dry and shaded. Beneath the leaf litter lay level stone floors, cut steps, straight ridgelines, and clear pathways ascending steep hillsides. This description precisely matches 16th-century Spanish accounts from Hernando de Soto's expedition, as well as 18th-century observations by the naturalist William Bartram, who marveled at oak and chestnut groves in Georgia, so pristine and open they resembled private English estates. While modern ecological science attributes this open forest condition to controlled burning practiced by Native Americans, Cherokee elders offered a broader perspective. They stated that they were not the ones who had originally established this vast continental system of management. They were merely the caretakers who inherited a long-standing regime that had begun to decay. Following their arrival, as the original keepers withdrew, the forest slowly began to close in. The undergrowth returned, swallowing the walking rooms and stone paths in the natural process of succession that overtakes any untended garden. Physical monuments across the region corroborated their accounts. At Fort Mountain in Georgia, a 900-foot serpentine stone wall stood on a high ridge, attributed to the Cherokee to the Moon-Eyed people. In Jackson County, North Carolina, the petroglyphs at Judaculla Rock were credited to Tsul Kalu, a slant-eyed, seven-fingered giant whose residence was described as a mortarless stone townhouse. When the Bureau of American Ethnology published Mooney's landmark monograph, Myths of the Cherokee, in 1900, institutional editors framed these narratives strictly as folklore and literary mythology alongside animal fables. Yet in the margins of his original field notes, Mooney repeatedly noted that his informants insisted these events were physical history, not metaphorical stories. Swimmer consistently used the past definite grammatical tense, the Cherokee linguistic form reserved exclusively for factual, witnessed events, when speaking of the older inhabitants and the Great Settling. Mooney's notebooks reveal a meticulous ethnographer grappling with testimony that suggested North America's eastern hardwood forest had been shaped on a continental scale long before European contact or Cherokee settlement. James Mooney eventually left the Qualla boundary to continue his work among other tribes, and Swimmer passed away in 1899, buried quietly in the mountains before Mooney's final report reached print. Swimmer's manuscript book and Mooney's 47 field notebooks eventually found their place in the Smithsonian's National Anthropological Archives in Washington. Today, the handwritten pages remain available to anyone willing to study them line by line. They record the words of Cherokee elders who looked upon the deep hardwood forests of the Blue Ridge not as an untamed wilderness, but as an ancient inherited garden, a managed world whose original architects had faded into memory, leaving their physical marks silent beneath the mountain leaf mold.